Well, this is hello and goodbye. After 16 years at the IoD, I'm leaving for pastures new. But what I wanted to do was maybe look backwards and forwards, look backwards at the key economic events of the last 15, 16 years, and then embark on a bit of speculation about what we might see over the coming decade. Now, if we look back, then it's pretty clear, I think, that there were three absolutely seminal events. First, of course, is 9/11. The second is the Great Recession. And then the third is the extraordinary easing in monetary policy, which we've seen over recent years with record low interest rates. But what lessons can we learn from those three things? Well, I think the first thing is with regard to 9/11, and that is there will be geopolitical shocks. 9/11 wasn't really on many people's radar before it happened. But if you look back at the 80s with the collapse of communism, you look at the early 90s as well with the unification of Germany and the growth of European integration. And then you look beyond that as well into the noughties and the geopolitical event there clearly with 9/11 and the war on terror. And so what we see is that there's one pattern here, and that is there will be surprises. There will be a geopolitical shock, and there will be one probably over the coming decade. So let's speculate a little bit in a few moments about what that might be. But turning to the lessons we can learn from the economic events, the Great Recession and the easing in monetary policy. Again, I think people were caught off guard when all the signs were there that there was a problem with securitization and in the financial markets. But people tend to ignore that. They believe the good times will roll forever, and they don't necessarily do so. So I think the key lesson there is watch out for extraordinary events. Watch out for the speculation about what might happen. And even though you might be in a minority, take a closer look at some of those things, because you may learn a lot from them and you may gain a step on your rivals and a step ahead. And that could be the difference between success and failure in the longer term. And then with regard to extraordinary monetary policy with quantitative easing, well, the IoD is not an organisation which likes governments to print money, but extraordinary times called for extraordinary policies, and we do need quantitative easing. We have needed it. Without quantitative easing, there would have been deflation. And given the backdrop of high public and private sector debt, deflation is absolutely the last thing you need. So it was the right policy, but we don't want it to go too far, and it does need to be reversed at some stage in the future. I think the lesson to be learned there, though, is that central banks can be caught off guard as well. There are a lot of very, very clever economists in central banks, but that intelligence doesn't always add up to combined wisdom as well, and they do make mistakes. And I would just say that the key lesson is watch money, see what the growth of broad money is doing in the economy, and that can give you a signal for what the future might hold. Speculation about the future. Well, I think the next year is going to be quite good in the UK economy. We've said for quite some time that 2013-14 would surprise on the upside, and that's been borne out by the reality, the facts on the ground. Economic activity is clearly on the up, and we think that will be sustained through the rest of this year. But it also has within it the growth, the seeds of its own destruction. At some stage, we're going to have to see some normalisation of monetary policy with higher interest rates and reversal in quantitative easing. Quite when that comes, I'm not sure. I think that will come at some stage in 2015, and that will begin to level things off. But it's going to look good for quite some time yet. Globally, though, I still worry about the euro crisis and the potential flare up there in the future. And I still worry about the knock-on effects on the banking system in Europe and the knock-on effects on the global economy and the financial system more generally. Hate to be the bearer of bad tidings. I think there are some real risks out there that we could see part two of a financial crisis sometime 2015 plus. So whilst I'm optimistic in the short term, beyond this year, I do feel that we have to be very mindful. And I'd go back to what I started with as well. There is likely to be some form of geopolitical shock. Where that comes, is it sourced in the Middle East? We do not yet know. But I think given the fragility of the financial system, given the likelihood that there will be a geopolitical surprise, then although it's going to look good for the next 12 months, there's There's no room for complacency whatsoever.